Hi everybody, it's Lydia here. I know what you're thinking, 2 reviews in the space of 1 week, what is going on? But anyway, today's review is Prisoner of Night and Fog by Anne Blankman. This is a historical YA fiction. It is about a girl named Gretchen who was living in Munich in 1931, and her father was a Nazi martyr basically who threw himself in front of Hitler to save him from being shot during a rally back something like 13 years ago, and as a result Gretchen has kind of grown up being fondly looked upon by Hitler and being looked after by the National Socialist Party, aka the Nazi Party. So she has this fond and wonderful view of Hitler. She calls him her Uncle Dolph, and it's basically about how a chance encounter with this Jewish journalist ends up kind of opening her eyes to who he really is. It is actually the first in a series of books, the second of which is coming out this coming spring, and if you liked The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, then you'll probably quite like this. It's a very similar style. It is YA, as I said, but it is taking kind of historical fact and mixing it with fiction. I'm not gonna lie, it did take me a little while to get into this book. There were times when the description was just kind of a bit too much. This is Blankman's first book, and you know, sometimes when you're really starting out writing you kind of tend to overdo the description a bit and use too many adverbs and too many metaphors and just over describe everything. Well, there is a little bit of a case of this, I think, especially early on, not so much later on. But that said, there are still moments when her writing is really beautiful. She used this one phrase which made me laugh. It was so random. Her heart kicked against her ribs like a recalcitrant mule. And I just thought that was such a brilliant description. Like, who would have thought of that kind of thing? It's so random, but it works really well, and immediately you understand what she's talking about. So there are definitely signs that she's going to be a really great writer, but I think because this is her first book, that sometimes shows every now and again. As far as the characters go, they're really interesting. The lead protagonist, Gretchen, it's really kind of told from her point of view, and it's really interesting because obviously you're seeing her view of Hitler and her idea of who he is and what he's like really change as this novel goes on, and it's interesting the way that happens, the way that kind of breaks down. There were a few times when it did feel like the character was almost going back on herself in a way. There were a few moments where I thought she was kind of further along hating him, and then suddenly she was back to calling him her Uncle Dolph again, and so there were just a few little inconsistencies with that. But they weren't anything major, and in general she was a really well written character, and there's serious character development in this book. There's also a whole relationship between her and this Jewish journalist Daniel, who kind of is the one to open her eyes to what's really going on, and that's a really interesting relationship because obviously she has grown up being taught that she should look down on Jews and avoid them and they are awful people, and yet she meets this guy and he's kind of the total opposite of that, and it's really interesting. Their relationship is equally, he hates her because she is the daughter of this Nazi sympathiser or Nazi martyr. So it's quite an interesting relationship, and that development is a really key thread to the plot and really helps it develop. Again, with that there were moments when novice writing came through, but that didn't like ruin my enjoyment of the book in any way. I still really enjoyed it, and it was a really interesting thread. On Goodreads I gave this review 4 stars, and then I knocked it down to 3 because I think 3.5 is probably about where I stand, but 4 seemed like too much. The reason I didn't give it 4 or 5 stars was simply because there were times when the believability factor kind of failed a bit, and obviously this is kind of half set in fact and half fiction, and there are times where the fiction seemed to take over too much. I mean, obviously it's very difficult because she's writing about these people who from history we view abhorrently, and everything they did was just awful, and so it's very difficult to view these people in any other way. And I think at times some of the actions that Hitler and the other National Socialists do it's not overly believable. But I still really enjoyed the book overall, and particularly towards the end it really picks up pace, and I did read it in pretty much one sitting, so it did keep me captivated. I'm not overly sure whether I'll read the second book. I might see what the reviews are like first, because although I did enjoy it, it's the kind of book that seems strange for it to be a series. I think it might have worked better as a standalone book. I'm not overly sure where it's going to go next, and it might become a bit farcical in a way, but I don't know, and I will wait and see what the reviews are like, and read it myself. There will be a full review of this on my blog, which I have linked below. You can check that out. I'm not great at updating it, but I am trying to get better at it, and hopefully I will become better as the year goes on, or the year is nearly over, but as the months go on. But anyway, I will see you again tomorrow with another video, but until then, bye!